Hello, everybody, and welcome to this new episode of the Empowerment Podcast. This episode is a special one. We have our first guest coming on, Larisa Miller. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to attend this interview. It's always a pleasure meeting you. You are so knowledgeable, and I'm sure that people here will derive a lot of value out of listening to you speak.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to be the first guest. And I'm hoping that I can add some value to your listeners.
Yeah, all right. So let's get into it. To give you a little introduction, you are the leader of Phoenix Global, involved with multiple firms working at the forefront of development and technology, city development, agri-tech, and sustainability. You were head of business development for a member of the royal family of Abu Dhabi right before becoming the head of their nonprofit organization focusing on women and youth. Award-winning keynote speaker, sharing your knowledge across the world, currently focusing both your professional and philanthropic work in Africa, but not limited to that, of course, since you're working with clients in over 6 continents. You are an impressive human, to say the least, leader of industry, influential among women and people across the world. And so my question for you is, what drove you to become who you are? What is the why behind everything that you're doing?
Well, I've always seen the world as bigger than myself, but that I have a responsibility to make a contribution in whatever space that I occupy, wherever I happen to be. And I grew up on a farm in a little tiny rural county in central Pennsylvania, and spent considerable time as a youth looking through National Geographic magazines of my parents, knowing that I wanted to get out there and see the bigger world, be a part of the bigger world, and learn from the bigger world. And as soon as I had the opportunity to really spread my wings, I took advantage of that. And if you're paying attention in life, opportunities find you, and you can drive your own pathway forward. And many people believe that they get channeled into whatever the line of their career or the opportunities that they have. And I fundamentally believe that we have the ability to really direct and shape and focus our own destinies. And that if you want it badly enough, you're going to find a way to build your life in the pathway that serves you the best and allows you to serve humanity the best. Subsequently, I've had opportunities that I think others haven't had, because I'm always looking for ways that I can add value to others first and foremost. And that leads you to extraordinary relationships and friendships. And I've had opportunities that others haven't had, that have allowed me to really begin to make a mark, and I think mentor and influence and be an example for others who have a responsibility to leave the most responsible footprint they can on humankind.
Wow, that is beautiful. And one of the ways in which you've been doing that is through being the leader of a foundation. And so I'd like us to go deeper into that. What was it like being in those refugee camps?
So I had the pleasure of working in the UAE for many years with members of the royal family in Abu Dhabi, and heading up their large nonprofit that worked with youth and worked with women. I've had the distinct honor of being able to visit refugee camps in Iraq and Jordan and Yemen, and rural parts of Africa. And those are the experiences that left the most indelible mark on me, because you really see and appreciate and understand the kindness that exists in humanity in even during the most desperate of situations. And when you are welcomed into a tent that a family of 10 occupies in a refugee camp in Iraq, and they have a very a minimal amount of food to feed their family for the whole day, and yet they offer that food in entirety to you as a gesture of hospitality. And I think, how many of us would do the same if someone knocked on our door? When you have somebody that I was in a refugee camp, again, it was in Mosul, Iraq, and I had a little girl that stayed with me throughout the day. She was glued to me. I mean, and affection was our only means of conversation, and she held my hand. And at the end of the day, one of my Emirati friends said to her, "What do you want?" Now, keep in mind, this girl had no coat, her shoes were mismatched, her clothes didn't fit. And she looked up at him with the biggest smile and said, I don't want anything. I have everything I need. And it was in that moment that I realized that we have everything we need, and yet we want more. Our children want more. They want the next game. We want more. We'll be happier when we have a bigger house, when we get a better job, when we get married, when we have a different car. There's always something additional that will make us happy. And we're never just happy with what we have. And it was in that moment that I realized that every day you just have to look at what you have, be grateful for what you have, appreciate opportunities to be able to, increase your value to others, increase your impact on the world, and make physical possessions less a part of your to-do list, your goals for life, and to really focus on putting a smile on the face of someone in this world that has no reason to smile. And that really has changed my whole business outlook and ethos. And I really became much more impact driven and less focused on the bottom line of business. I mean, the bottom line is important, but business has to have a conscience if it wants to be a vanguard of the future.
Damn, that doesn't sound like our happiness episode. Man, she nailed it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that exactly while she was talking about this. She nailed everything. You have all of the secrets to being happier. And so yeah, congrats to you on that. And so to move a little bit into the business side, what would you say to women across the world and people across the world who would like to follow your footsteps and enter the competitive world of business?
Women have such a valuable perspective to add to business. We're not necessarily, and now this is a gross generalization, but we're not necessarily linear thinkers. We have a lot of emotion that we infuse into our perspective and our decisions, and therefore we add a lot of value to the business world. And yet still too often to this day, women are underworked, undervalued, underestimated, and underpaid. And I always tell women that if you don't have a seat at the table, you need to pull up a chair. This is our time. This is our time to leave our mark on humanity, to force ourselves to the front of the business line, so to speak, and to be a voice for the 400 voiceless women in poverty around the world that don't have the same opportunities that we all have. Too often women sabotage one another rather than support one another. And this is our time to stand shoulder to shoulder, to be that pillar of support for each one of us, to mentor and be open to reverse mentoring, understanding that we don't know everything. And there's a lot for all of us to keep learning. And, we're the rule makers, we're the change makers, we're the glass ceiling breakers. And this is our time to help empower one another to achieve our full potential.
Oh, okay. So I'm a person, I'm empowered, I'm happy, and I'm ready. What are some of the industries that you're looking out for in the following decade? If you were to start again, how would you go about doing it?
That's an interesting question because, and it used to be each decade that passed, we would have more or less a cycling into a new era of innovation or ideas or technology, but now it's moving so quickly and that it's almost every year we have to be resilient and flexible enough to discard our legacy business model and go in a new direction, an uncharted direction. A ship is safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships were built for. And so to be truly successful, we have to always stay on the cusp of what is leading us into the new future. Technology is going to be the epicenter of every industry and sector as we move forward. Agriculture and agri-tech are going to always remain key industries. If we can't feed ourselves, there won't be an investment in any industry or sector that will make sense. And the agriculture industry is the root of almost every industry and sector known to man. Your manufacturing industries, if you take it back to the foundational element of what it is that you're manufacturing, agriculture is somewhere in that pipeline. So agriculture is very important to me. And energy is very important, as we have a rapidly burgeoning population across this planet with increasing demands for energy. The earth has given us enough for our needs, but not enough for our greed. And with that greed, it comes this increased demands on our energy grids, our energy consumption, and the way that we look at transportation, the way that we look at energy, and the way that we look at our own footprint and consumption. And so energy is a very important sector that needs to be considered moving forward. But again, technology touches all of that.
Yeah, that is true. I think technology has been growing so fast in the last while. There's a chart actually that we've been talking about in the last podcast about how technology actually moves exponentially up until we get to a point where we're gonna have a new revolution every other year, and I think we're there. And so, one of the things that you're getting into that is pretty revolutionary, I see that you're seriously involved with a Skopje Technology Park, which, based on what I read, seems to be one of the future hotspots, pun intended, for IoT development in Europe. Business incubators, two hotels, luxurious living spaces. It's a humongous project. You're literally involved in the development of one of the first smart cities the world has ever seen. And that's so important because smart cities are a big thing for humanity since more and more people are moving into urban environments. But the cities we have today can't deal with the amount of traffic, consumption, and waste that is created by more people moving there. Smart cities solve that together with other problems we haven't even thought of. So, what can you tell us about the future of this project? What can you tell us about this trend with smart cities and IoT? And when can I move there?
Well, technology, as I mentioned, is going to be increasingly important, and centers that harness technology and are drivers for innovation and incubators for the newest minds coming up with those innovations that will belong to the mega computer and digital and data companies. We have to create these centers where we welcome those with the talent and the knowledge to be able to be the shapers of what our future of technology will be. Connectivity is changing, and COVID has shown us that technology allows us to come together while staying apart. But nevertheless, we're generating data at such a remarkable speed that unless we have the adequate data centers to be able to manage and hold the amounts of data that we're collecting. And by the way, data collection is one of those phrases that everyone throws out. It's one of the most overused terms in the English language, I think only tied second to sustainability. And yet, people are harnessing all this data, but they don't adequately know what to do with it or how to monetize it or how to introduce it into business in a way that makes sense and adds value to others in the supply chain, others in the value chain. So to have data centers that can collect the valuable data that we're going to need to be able to drive this technological revolution that we're in the midst of, but also to create opportunity in regions that make sense from a cost standpoint, from an energy standpoint, from a knowledge standpoint, is critical. We're looking at technology cities, so to speak, in areas in Eastern Europe, not just in Skopje, North Macedonia, in Georgia, in Slovenia. We're looking in India, and to be able to harness the collective power and knowledge of technology into these epicenters that will be the drivers of the future of business and industry, I think is key and a great investment opportunity for companies that are looking to attach themselves to the latest and greatest in what the revolutions, innovations, the ideas, the inventions that are coming out of the technologies that we're finding in areas around the world. And, there are so many innovations that are happening across the planet that we're unaware of, that if we think that we're our own little island of isolation, and that we are innovating faster than anybody else, we're lying to ourselves, because what's happening in the Far East, what's happening in India, what's happening in Europe, we're all coming up with different ideas that will be able to lead us across the precipice of where we are right now, at this very disruptive time in business. And collectively, if we come together in both collaboration and competitive collaboration, we're going to have so many more opportunities and be that much so far ahead because of gleaning knowledge that others have around the world. And these epicenters of technology allows us to bring people in from all areas of the world to really drive the futures of innovation in technology, in transportation, in agriculture, in education, in finance, and when they're all gathered together into one center, it's a pretty powerful location for driving the future of business and industry.
Yeah. I mean, that is truly amazing to witness that and to see it happen before our eyes. And another question I would have to you is about the future of blockchain, which in regards to governments around the world, the trend of decentralization in general. You working both with governments and with blockchain, I think you have a unique and valuable perspective on this. So where do you see adoption taking place? Where do you see some friction between these disruptive technologies and disruptees? Do you see blockchain currencies and blockchain in general being a part of smart city development?
Now, blockchain is going to touch every industry and sector. Every bit of information, every data, everything we need to know about the functionings of business and ourselves is going to be attached to the blockchain in some way, shape, or form. And, there's such a misnomer out there amongst people that cryptocurrency is blockchain. And, you stop and talk to someone on the street and ask them about blockchain, and somehow they're going to attach it to cryptocurrency. And, what they don't understand is that the blockchain is the links of knowledge that we need and that we need to be able to secure and have access to no matter where we are in the world. One of the friction points, one of the stumbling blocks is a lack of knowledge. We're at period where you have a generation that was reared at the very fundamental stages of technology coming into society, and you have those who grew up with technology. And so there's a lack of knowledge from one side to the other and a real need for knowledge transfer. And Gary and I talk about this quite a bit, where, I'm so heavily involved in technology, but my understanding of cryptocurrency and the blockchain as a whole is still very limited. And, life doesn't stop teaching, so we can't stop learning. And I think until we crest to a generation that has truly grown up with the blockchain being fundamental to their lives, to their careers, to their educational paths, to their bank accounts, we're going to really have these challenges that come with introducing such a shocking new disruptor into our lives. But the blockchain is here to stay, and it's going to be an ever increasingly important component of business, industry, and all of the sectors and industries that tie to humankind, essentially.
Yeah, that is right. And you learn so much. You are so knowledgeable on these topics that are very new, and you're on top of absolutely everything that is going on in the world right now when it comes to development and tech. So how do you go about educating yourself? How do you learn? How does that happen?
I pay attention, and I tell my kids this all the time. Destiny, opportunity, innovation will walk right past those who are too busy taking selfies. You have to look up, you have to see the world, you have to take time to talk to people, get to know people, things that you don't understand. Make the time to learn. Even if you just take 10 minutes every day to learn about something that you heard about yesterday that you're not really familiar about, when that goes into this wonderful tool that we're all given called our brains, if we exercise it, if we put data into it, what it can extract for us and guide us and really shape our thought processes to where, I am somewhere today that I never even imagined 10 years ago, and it's all because of learning, taking advantage of opportunities, appreciating the experiences that are in front of me, looking at ways that I can add value to each and every person that steps in front of me, which have led to some of the most extraordinary friendships, which have led to a phone contact list that people can't even imagine, but yet I don't take for granted. So, just constantly making sure that I'm learning, that I'm meeting new people, that I listen to what they have to say, and that I don't assume that I know more than they do. That's really the basis for shaping you into a well-rounded adult that will continue to find ways to grow and add value, not just to your own business, not just to your own bottom line, but to your legacy that you will leave well beyond your lifespan.
Yeah, that goes very much in line with what we've been talking about in the first and second episode. Like, empower people and see what they can do. It's incredible what people can achieve if they just pay attention, if they learn, and if they set out their mind to doing something special.
Yep.
And yeah, dedication goes a long way. And so, to go back to your roots and to talk about a subject that I know is very dear to your heart, which is agriculture and agrotech, what can you tell us about the future of our harvesting system, harvesting methods?
But agriculture is changing just as rapidly as every other industry and sector. If we look at the age-old methods of farming, we wouldn't be able to feed ourselves in this very digital, this very hyper connected, this disruptive and very transformational future that we're facing, with a global population that is set to double by 2050. Food security, that is the one common denominator that we all have on this planet, agnostic to our religion, to our gender, to our ethnicity, to our socioeconomic standing. The one common denominator that we all have is that we need to eat. And, I look at our farming here in the United States and how we are losing family farms exponentially every year. And every time there's a farm lost, it's not replaced with another farm. Every time we lose a farmer and the knowledge that that farmer has, if it doesn't pass to the next generation, that knowledge is gone. But we have to be innovating the legacy business model of agriculture to make it relevant to this very technological, very innovative future that we're facing. That means, in my particular case, that means finding models that will allow us to step away from the grow and hope method of agriculture that agriculture has operated under for centuries, where you plant your seed or you raise your livestock and you hope you get a good price for it at harvest time. We need to be taking much more direct control over our own destiny and removing hope as a word from our business model. One of the companies that I'm so passionate about here in Pennsylvania is my new livestock company, where we've found a way to secure the supply chain by removing that grow and hope aspect, by securing the offtake first, and then building the herd or planting the seeds to be able to meet that offtake. Over 80% of what we grow is wasted in this world. It either rots or it's gone for waste. And if we plant enough for our needs and have an adequate roadmap for how to use what it is that we plant and harvest or grow or raise, we will be able to feed the population without anyone having to deal with poverty, without creating any additional waste, and while leaving a more responsible and sustainable footprint on our environment. So for me, agriculture is my passion, and it's one of the most important focuses that we can all either contribute to. And if you're not in the agricultural industry, if you're in some other industry or sector, you can directly benefit the agricultural industry by making more responsible choices as a consumer, and trying to be a little bit less wasteful in what we take for granted in the supermarket as being something that we have an abundance of, when there's so many around this world, for which food security is just a dream.
Africa is growing a lot, especially in the segment of agriculture. There's this commonly held belief that I know you have as well, that Africa will play a huge role in the world economy as the continent that will feed us as we grow. And so my question to you is, what other industries where Africa seems to be a key role, or to have a key role, or an advantage in order to become the leader of those industries, and what needs to happen for that to become a possibility?
Africa is the landmass that will save the world. It has the arable farmland that we need to be able to feed the population. It has an abundance of natural resources that we need around the world to be able to keep our hyper connected and ultra innovative digital technology alive. And we have a collective responsibility to empower and accelerate the economies in Africa. Too often, Africa has been essentially raped by outsiders who come in and take exactly what they need from the continent and they go back home. They aren't educating, they aren't utilizing the abundant human capital that exists on the continent of Africa. They aren't finding ways to strengthen African economies through those natural resources that are so often plundered by other economies around the world. And we have a collective responsibility to be investing in Africa, to be empowering Africa, to be helping to build up the infrastructure of Africa, to be educating the masses in Africa so that they can take control of the valuable resources that they have to offer the world. I'm very passionate about Africa. We have urban sprawled ourselves out of our own global food security, out of our production of energy resources and everything we need to be able to carry this world forward, and not limp this world into hospice as we are doing right now. But everything we need to be able to carry this world forward in a healthy, sustainable way exists on the continent of Africa. If businesses and companies aren't aware of the opportunities in Africa, take the time to educate yourself. Find ways to expand your operations into Africa, and utilizing the talent that exists in Africa rather than bringing in expatriate labor and so forth. There's abundance of investment opportunities for foreign direct investment. There's opportunities for business and expansion and growth. And there's really opportunities to be able to work collectively to expand our own, foundational business models while helping to empower a continent that is going to be so critical to our future.
Yeah, I mean, Africa's GDP is about 2.69 trillion, which is where China's was in 2006, and we know what happened there. When it comes to economic measurements, we can see Africa pulling the numbers China did in the early 2000s. But I mean, if we look at the demographics, the dependency ratio, literacy rate, the number of educated people, and so on, we can see Africa being where China was in the 80s. I don't claim to be an expert on this, but experts do say that Africa, all in all, is in a better position than China to face the exponential growth, even when given the difference in demographics. There's this cycle of education that leads to lower dependency ratio, that leads to ultimately economic growth that Africa needs to get on in order to have those demographics trending towards numbers more favorable for economic growth. And it all starts with education. And so with me being in the education field, I have to ask, what is being done about education in Africa? Can people afford higher education? And is it a situation where people want it, but the infrastructure or cost is not there yet? Or the institutions are there, but people aren't applying?
So what you a thought shift that you need to have is that China is a country and Africa is a continent. And Africa is made up of many, many different countries, different cultures, different tribes, different religions, different backgrounds. And each country has a different value. What you can capitalize on and help to grow in Northern Africa and the MENA region is going to be completely different down in sub-Saharan Africa. Their understandings, their knowledges, their resources, the value that they can contribute. Everywhere in Africa, we have abundant value that the rest of the world needs to depend on, but it can't be gross generalized into just Africa. Africa can't be seen as a country. It has to be seen as a continent made up of all the wonderful nations in Africa. But each nation has their own capacity for growth, their own capacity to be able to care for their societies, and their own needs. You have some cities like Dar es Salaam in South Africa that are very progressive and growing exponentially. And then you have other areas of Africa that are so impoverished and really need the rest of the world to be able to uplift them and contribute economically to them so that they can achieve their full potential. You know, there are countries that are prioritizing part of their GDP into cryptocurrency. There are countries that are looking at their water resources and looking at hydroelectric opportunities. You know, but all of it comes back to the foundation of education. I mean, and that's universal to all of us around the world. But in Africa, we really have to reimagine the way we look at the education system. The brick and mortar education system that we all know and were educated under in the more complex nations of the world is never going to be practical for Africa. We have to rethink the traditional education model. We have to look at how we can use vocational technical training, how we can use mentorship programs, how we can use programs around apprenticeship. You know, it worked so well for the United States in the 1700s, where you apprenticed with a blacksmith, a master blacksmith, you became a blacksmith. You apprentice with a carpenter, you become a carpenter. You know, we are too tied to that piece of paper called a degree, and we use that to assess the value that a person has or the knowledge that they have. And where Africa is concerned, we have to be able to understand that we have such an intelligent and insightful nation that is ripe and wanting the education and the skills building that they have to be able to build their continent from within. We just have to reimagine, rethink that educational platform that we introduce into Africa and recognize that what works in the United States, what works in Europe, what works in China is never going to work in Africa. We have to build something that makes sense for Africa. We have to recognize that, you know, when you have a school system where a child has to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning without shoes, walking 3 hours just to get to school, that's not probably a sustainable educational model. But if we look at programs where we are doing skills building, we are creating a technology hub in the middle of a village where kids can go and access a computer and learn from online learning modules and not make it so tied to a piece of paper, where we value the fact that, you know, you can have a farmer that passes his knowledge down, and now you have a generation of master farmers coming behind him that never had to set foot in a school, but yet they have every bit as equal a knowledge contribution to make as those of us who had access to premier universities around the world. So it's often us in the very complex and developed nations that try to impose what we think should be the education system that Africa subscribes to, or we think what the standards of growth and development should be in Africa. And instead, we need to actually spend time in Africa and listen to Africa and see what makes sense for Africa. And then we will find those progressive business models that will allow for us to expand our businesses into a new hemisphere and onto a new continent that will make sense not only for Africa, but that will be valuable for all of us in our developed nations as well. So, you know, the traditional education system that we have here in the United States, it's not going to work in Africa. We have to do what makes sense in Africa, but only if we visit Africa, spend time there, and see what's practical for Africa will we truly be able to help and empower and uplift Africa from an educational standpoint.
So it always goes back to listening, paying attention, learning, and adapting based on that.
You know, I'm going to if I can just interject one story that came from Africa that really shows the strength and the resiliency of the African people that even trumps what we are here in the United States. Before I went to Liberia in 2016, and I was going with ACON at the time and on behalf of the Foundation for the Royal Family, and we were promoting it on Facebook, and I I had posted that I'd be coming with Akon to Liberia. And a young boy from Liberia reached out to me through Facebook and asked me if I would be his mother. And what do you say to that? So I gave the very politically correct answer back saying, I'm looking forward to visiting your country. I hope to see you. Thank you for contacting me. And I went to Liberia, and we drove about 4.5 hours outside of Monrovia, the capital of Liberia, to a rural village where Akon was putting solar streetlights up at a school. And thousands of Liberians were coming, many walked for days to be able to come to this school to see Akon. And we get there, and we are heralded out of our vehicles over to a VIP area that's all roped off from the people that were there to see Akon. And through this crowd of thousands, I could hear someone saying my name, and I turned around, and here was Lincoln, the boy who had reached out to me through Facebook, who turned out that he was not a boy anymore. He was 22 years old. And I asked him a bit about his story, and his parents were killed walking home from church by guerrilla rebels during the Civil War in Liberia when he was 11 years old. And at 11, he was left alone to raise his 1-year-old twin brothers and his 2-year-old sister. And he would, no other family on earth now except for his 3 siblings. And he would work on a farm at night while they slept so that he could earn money to be able to feed them and clothe them. And when they became school age, he made sure that every single one of them went to school, had their tuition paid. He would work however many jobs he had to be able to keep his siblings with him so that nobody would take them away, and to make sure that all of their basic needs were met. I asked him at the time, I said, I'm so inspired by your story, but you're 22. Why did you want me to be your mother? And he said, because I always had to be the mother. I never had a mother for myself. And it's so powerful when you think that, in times of duress, in times when we are stressed the hardest, our, fight or flight takes steps in, and too often people give up. Too often people crumble under the weight and the pressure and the challenges that they face. And here is a young man at 11 who stood up and assumed the role of parent of 1-year-old twin babies and a 2-year-old who is still veritably a baby. And, you never know how strong you are until that is your only option. And I think how many 11-year-olds who grow up in our society that have everything they can want and access to all the resources, how many of them would be able to assume the role of a parent and go to work and make sure that the bills were paid? And, that really speaks to the strength and the resiliency and the determination and the courage that are found innately in the people of Africa. And when you tap into all of those attributes and you tie it to education and you give them the means and the opportunity, their future is unstoppable. And we need their future to be unstoppable, because every single one of us, no matter how many opportunities we have or how complex and developed and opportunity laden our countries are, we will all need Africa at some point. And the people of Africa have every bit of what it takes to be the leaders of tomorrow.
Wow. It honestly leaves me speechless to hear this story. Gary, if you have any remark, anything to say about this beautiful story, I'm completely sold on Africa.
You know me, I'll quantify things in one sentence, and that sounds like talent is evenly distributed, but resources and opportunity are not. And if we're going
Amen.
to solve some of our society's most complex issues, very similar to football, we must work together as an offense or as a defense, and it's going to take the perspective of each of these different people. But until we have a certain level of education and inclusion and opportunity for everybody, then we're not going to be able to solve some of those complex issues in society because the perspectives aren't there yet. So nailed it. Yes, all that.
Yes. Okay, guys. So you heard the classic end of the podcast, Gary remark. And that concludes the end of this episode. Larisa, thank you very much again for being here and sharing all of this valuable knowledge that you gave us. And yeah, this concludes
Thank
the
you
end of the
both.
episode. Yeah, goodbye.
Thank you all.